two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Jorge DeFendini. He is the chair of Ithaca Democratic Socialists of America, and that is one of the organizations that is now part of a campaign for the City of Ithaca adopting just cause for workers, just cause in employment. So, Jorge, what situation does this proposed legislation address?
I have been working on Just Cause for quite some time, and it's addressing a serious issue that impacts not just Ithaca, but countless cities and municipalities throughout New York State. Now, you and I both know that we all live under the regime of a system of economic workplace known as at-will employment. And so basically, in the city of Ithaca, right now, for no reason at all, you can be fired from your job. You can be fired with no reason, with no notice, and this is all perfectly legal. And now, as a result of this, we now have a sort of backdoor loophole for issues of discrimination. So while it is technically illegal to fire somebody for their race, ethnicity, gender, religion, etc., as long as you don't state that as the explicit reason for firing somebody, you are perfectly empowered to do so as your reasoning. Just don't, sort of leave that off the pink slip, if you will.
Having the wrong kind of hairstyle is not protected.
That's right. So maybe with a few more years and a few more campaigns, we can get that included as well. But yeah, so basically right now we have it so that without will employment, you could be let go from your job for no reason at all with no notice. That's the way things are right now in the city of Ithaca, but it doesn't need to be how they stay. And so right now we're working on some legislation called just cause protections. Now, I know you and I are familiar with this sort of verbiage for as it pertains to housing with good cause eviction or just cause eviction in other places that basically state you can't be evicted from your home if you've been doing everything per your lease and you've been paying your rent. Your landlord needs to give you an opportunity to re-sign or renew your lease. It's a similar concept for the workplace if we have just cause protections citywide. Basically, your employer will only be able to fire you for a just cause for termination. And by that, I mean you need to have demonstrated an inability to sort of meet, performance standards. You have not been working with your boss as they have been asking for you to make certain course corrections in the workplace, or for bona fide economic reasons, like the company is in the red, there simply aren't enough expenses to keep you as a worker on. This legislation isn't going to force businesses that are incapable of keeping their workers to stay open. That is still a just cause for termination, as are many other normal issues that you might come to mind on the surface level of your conscience for wanting to fire somebody. They're, committing crimes or what have you, and not doing their job, not showing up to work. These are all just causes for termination. But with this legislation, we will be able to prevent these no cause firings, these firings under ambiguous or arbitrary reasoning. And we're going to be able to enforce it with something called a Workers Rights Commission. So this will essentially be a quasi-judicial board appointed by the Common Council that will hear cases of wrongful termination that workers bring forward to them if they feel they've been wrongfully terminated. And if this commission makes a ruling in favor of those workers, these workers will be able to request that their employer, or rather demand that their employer either reinstate them or give them severance pay. And if this does not happen under a certain period of time, they are empowered to file a lawsuit against their employer, which can be taken up by the city itself, a nonprofit like the Worker Center, or a union, and then of course for the individual themselves. But this will be a very big game changer for creating more worker stability, more economic security for the working class in the city of Ithaca.
How do we know that situations like this are frequent or anything anything except rare?
Right. Well, if only there was an organization in our county, a center for workers, if you will, that addressed these issues. Now, I'm being a little facetious. We of course know that we have the Tompkins County Workers Center, and the Workers Center has been working for many years now to support workers in their efforts to get better conditions in their workplace, to address issues of discrimination or unfair practice in their workplace. And they've done a lot of this with the work of their workers hotline, which basically allows workers to call into the workers center with issues that they've been experiencing that they're hoping to receive redress for. And so now, as it stands for the past couple of years, as this hotline has been online and available, the Worker Center has received over 5,000 calls from workers throughout the county, not just Ithaca, but throughout the county. But of course, Ithaca is where the majority of these calls are coming in from or related to. The people work in the city of Ithaca, majority of them. And they found that more than a quarter of these phone calls about issues in their workplace, 26% of them are related to wrongful termination. The workers feeling that they were fired for no reason, or the reason they were given to wasn't a legitimate or honest one, or one that they agree with. And so this is it's by far the biggest issue that workers are contacting the center for. Now, again, this is for county-wide, but a great many of these cases are coming from the city of Ithaca. So it is a major problem. And these are just the cases that we are hearing about. There are so many people who work in the city of Ithaca who don't know of the Worker Center's existence or that they have a hotline that are dealing with these issues. Back when I was on the Common Council, and I was working at Insomnia Cookies, the fast food cookie shop. I would end my shift 2, 3 a.m. I would go down to the only store that was open, Luna's, and I would speak to some of the workers. And then on days right before Common Council, I would go to the Commons. I would go to Gorgers to get a sandwich. I would speak to workers at these places. And even if it wasn't at their workplace, they're all sharing that they can tell a story of at least once or twice working in the city of Ithaca in its service industry where they've been wrongfully terminated. So I've got plenty of anecdotes and plenty of data to show that this is a serious issue in our city.
So I think a lot of people must have been saying there ought to be a law. But what gives us the idea that there can be a law?
Right. Yep. As a former common counselor, I'm always looking for precedent and I'm always checking under my bed at night for the big boogeyman that is preemption. Now, again, Teresa, you and I, as big advocates for good cause eviction, know that preemption is sort of the boogeyman for legislation that we are trying to pass at the local level. The state courts basically saying that you don't have the authority or jurisdiction as a municipality to make this law. This is something for the state or the federal government to work out. The good news is that this is not one of those cases. So in 2019, 2021, an effort to get just cause protections in the workplace was taken up in New York City. It was called the Secure Jobs Act. It was introduced by a fellow socialist, Tiffany Caban, and it was fought for fast food workers. And similar to what we're doing right now, they assembled an incredible coalition of nonprofit progressive organizations, political parties like the Working Families Party, the Democratic Socialists of America in New York City. They had labor unions like SEIU and the UAW, all fighting for to see the Secure Jobs Act pass in New York City. And they did it. And in the short time that law has been on the books, it's been able to help people. one of the Starbucks workers in Astoria, Queens, was fired from their job under dubious circumstances. And through virtue of this law being on the books in New York City, they were able to get reinstated in their job. Now, I'm sure you and I can imagine what it must be like to have a Starbucks worker reinstated at their job up here in Ithaca. But all this to say is that this law has precedent not just in the country, but in the state at the local level. And of course, the fast food industry didn't take this lying down. They tried to bring this law to court and rule it as unconstitutional, as big industry and capital always do. And the courts ruled that no, this is something that cities are allowed to pursue. A city can opt in to creating just cause protections at the local level. That court then that the fast food industry then tried to bring it to the appellate court, our Supreme Court, if you will, in the New York State. And earlier this year, January, they ruled that just cause protections are perfectly fine and legal for municipalities to pursue. So we are in the legal clearing when trying to pursue just cause in the city of Ithaca.
Wow. So this won't be one of those too many cases where, and then it goes to litigation. The litigation has happened
Right.
and it has come out the way we needed it to come out.
That's right.
So you say there will now be a campaign in Ithaca.
That's right.
And there was a rally and an announcement just yesterday. I was there, but tell us about it.
For sure. Yes, it was a great rally under it was a perfect Ithaca winter rally in the beginnings of March.
Yes,
Um,
it snowed for exactly the time of the rally.
because it's the forces of capital are immeasurable. They've taken control of the weather. It was a very good event. We had members of our coalition present speaking about this. We had the Ithaca Solidarity Slate, Kayla Matos, Phoebe Brown, who among others will be fighting the fight to bring just cause to the city of Ithaca introduced. So they spoke very well about this. We also heard from some of our comrades in the Communist Party USA. We heard from the Gimme Union baristas, the Gimme Coffee Barista Union. We also heard from a fellow traveler for us, speaking of Starbucks, Stephanie Heslop, who is both the chair of the Tompkins County Working Families Party Club, but is also one of the main organizers of Starbucks Workers United here in Ithaca. And she had a very powerful moment during her speech where she pointed over to the Green Street Starbucks store, which now sits closed, where she used to work, and where she believes that Just Cause would have made a difference in keeping her.
No, correction, not Green Street, Seneca Street.
Seneca Street. Thank you, thank you. I always get them confused with the buses. The Seneca
Oh, I
Street,
see.
the Seneca Street Starbucks store, which now sits closed, where she used to work, and she talked about how Just Cause could have made the difference in keeping her at her workplace. And so that was really a really powerful moment. And we had Nathan Sitaraman from the Workers Center, which is heavily involved in this campaign, talking about that hard data. And another point that Nathan brought up to me after the rally that I wanted to share with you is a point that I touched on very briefly earlier. We might see, we've seen, as I mentioned, all these 5,000 cases that come to the Worker Center for a number of issues in their workplace. And if we pass Just Cause and we establish this Workers Rights Commission, we could get us, any number of cases before that commission. But what we won't be able to really record or measure are how many cases don't come to the commission as a result of this legislation, because bosses know that this is the law of the land in the city of Ithaca and are not going to put their workers in this precarious situation. And so we've gathered this sort of this combination of intelligentsia, organizing expertise, and the will of the people in this coalition that includes groups like Ithaca DSA, CPUSA, the Working Families Party, the UAW 2300, the Gimme Coffee Union. So many groups have come together. The Alternative Federal Credit Union, which is a business here. They have all endorsed Just Cause, and we're going to continue to grow this coalition to show that this is something that is popularly demanded of the people of Ithaca, whether you're a business person, a political activist or just simply a worker in this city. We want to see just cause.
Well, the biggest employer in the city is Cornell University.
That it is.
Uh, and for a change, I guess they would be subject to it, would they?
They would. And so I think I represent myself a perfect example of why we need just cause in the city. So I work since departing Common Council, I work as a casual part-time dining hall worker on West Campus at Cornell University. And as many may know, Cornell University's dining hall staff are protected by a UAW contract. And I wanted to also take this moment to announce that our legislation will have a union contract carve out. So if you belong to a collectively bargained unit or workplace, this law will not overwrite whatever your union has bargained for. And so this will be for ununionized workplaces or workers who don't enjoy the benefits of those just cause protections, such as myself, because as a part-time casual worker, I do not have the benefits of belonging to the UAW union. And so I could be in the exact same workplace as some of my coworkers and not enjoy these protections. And another group that this is true for are the student workers. The student workers at Cornell are not a part of the UAW union. They've tried many times, but they've been unable to join. If Just Cause is on the books, the just cause protections that exist in the UAW contract will be extended to the student workers and to the part-time workers who make Cornell dining possible, just to show you how important this workplace could be, even for unionized workplaces.
Well, I imagine that Cornell University is not one of your endorsers.
My invitation must have got lost in the mail. I can
Are
surmise this.
there any Cornell affiliated groups that are with you?
There are. And so so we mentioned Ithaca DSA, the Cornell Young Democratic Socialists of America are heavily involved in our campaign and have been workhorses in getting this done. They helped design the graphic for the rally, and they've helped design a whole lot of other things. My former organization back when I was on Cornell University, the Cornell Progressives, which used to be the organization that was campaigning for Bernie Sanders in 2020, has endorsed the legislation as well. And we've been in conversations with the AAUP, the American Association for University Professors at Cornell. Nothing is final yet, but they've all been very positive and good conversations. And we're looking to bring more of these groups. Climate Justice Cornell is also an endorsee, a climate justice advocacy group on Cornell campus. And so there's a lot of, and of course, as I mentioned, the UAW 2300, which is the union that protects Cornell workers, has also endorsed Just Cause. So we have a broad support amongst the Cornell community, just as we do the Ithaca community.
Sounds good. If this legislation had happened sooner, do you think we might still have Starbucks in this community?
I think it's very possible. What I don't want to posit myself as a snake oil salesman. This will be the silver bullet that does capital in here in the city of Ithaca. That's not the case. We've seen from Starbucks's union busting campaign that their strategy for keeping down the union is simply that we have more money than God, and we are ready, willing, and able to take any fine, fee, or lawsuit you bring against us on the chin and move forward with preventing these workers from having their demands met. And so it's very possible that we will simply that a lawsuit brought forth by the city of Ithaca, for instance, against Starbucks for union busting, could very well just be added to the heap pile of all of these other infractions that the NLRB have brought against Starbucks. And so I don't want to convince people that this will be the silver bullet that addresses all of their issues, but it will be really miraculous to have the city of Ithaca, a government institution, say, Starbucks, you're breaking the law. The law is you cannot fire somebody with if you do not provide a just cause, and you have violated that. And if Starbucks is ready to sort of dance that dance with the city of Ithaca, It gives the organizers who are going to be standing with Starbucks an opportunity to mobilize around that and say, look at how Starbucks, this corporation, flaunts its authority um, in front of the city government, the city of Ithaca, with our elected officials who we elect, who we pay our taxes to. Are we going to stand by and allow this to happen? Who runs this city? Is it us or is it them? And so I think that even at its bare minimum, what this law will do when taking on these big corporations like Starbucks and Cornell University is it will continue to expose the reality that corporations are flaunting their authority and their corruption in our faces. And it will only go on as long as we as ordinary people allow it to.
Yeah, well, I mean, Starbucks is quite you were saying they're willing to take fines and court cases against them. They were, I mean, in Ithaca, they closed down 3 stores, including 2 that must have been incredibly lucrative.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I don't want to suggest that, especially with these larger corporations, that Just Cause will be able to, provide the justice that we are seeking 100% of the time. But it will be another arrow in our quiver, so to speak, and it will be another point of mobilization and organizing that we in the city can utilize to continue to advance the cause of workers throughout the city.
Yeah, I mean, this is all extremely interesting for me because I had a couple of cases of being dropped from jobs in very nasty ways.
Mhm.
Now I have to say that the most striking one was more than 40 years ago, and my own memory of some of the details is getting a little fuzzy, thank goodness. Um, and I think in that case, I believe the excuse was not having the funding,
Mhm.
allegedly.
Allegedly.
I say allegedly because when the next semester came around, somebody else was hired for the position.
Mhm.
Somebody much prettier than me.
I guess they found some coins in the couch cushion.
So I think that I mean the useful thing kind of for both sides of finding it, of claiming that it was a financially caused layoff,
Mhm.
was that I was very easily able to get unemployment
Mhm.
and was collecting unemployment for months.
Well, yeah, I think that, as I mentioned at the onset of this interview, one of the just causes for termination under this legislation would be bona fide economic reason. So if the company or workplace is incapable of keeping you on staff while also making a profit, then that is a just cause for termination. Now, that is not just a blank check to say, okay, well, I'll just, we're doing very fine over here in our business. It's quite lucrative. But we're going to let you go and just state that reason. If you are a worker who was let go for economic reasons or financial reasons, and you feel that that was unjust, you bring this case forward to the Workers' Rights Commission, and that employer will have to show their documentation to the commission so that we can verify that that was the case. And if it was the case, then you will remain terminated. But if it was the case that we've caught them in a bold-faced lie, you may be owed restitution in the sense of either reinstatement at that job if you would like it, or some form of severance pay if you're like, well, after all of this, I don't think I'd want to return to my workplace, but a nice check would go a long ways as I look for my new job.
The unemployment people were kind of much nicer than the Cornell people and said that the point was that I should find a job that I was qualified for,
Mhm.
which was going to be very hard to find because they were, rare and would probably be in other places. Um, and actually, I suppose it would have been complicated by the fact that I don't think the employer who laid me off, fired me, or whatever they called it, dismissed me, said to me that that it was a matter of money.
Mhm.
They said, basically it was a psychological attack on me, saying that I was so bad I didn't understand how bad I was.
Right,
This after I had been promoted once.
right.
I was in my second year there.
Mhm.
Um,
Now,
so
this may shock you, Teresa, but that would not be a just cause for termination under our legislation. Being so bad that you don't even understand it. I don't have the law on my hand, but that is not something that's not written anywhere in there. And so they'd have to come
yeah.
up with a legitimate reason for termination.
Well, I mean, they would have had to explain why they had promoted me earlier on if I was that bad. Moreover, ironically, uh, within a couple of weeks, I and two coworkers got a contract with Macmillan Publishers
Mhm.
for a textbook that we were writing.
Mhm.
Uh, so apparently I had some talents in the field.
Right. You could say.
Uh, anyway, um, but excuses for laying people off are just abundant in this community.
Yeah.
Uh, in fact, I suppose, well, of course, it's a select group at the rally, but I know was it you or was it somebody else said, how many of you? I think about half the people raised their hands.
And those
And
hands stayed up when I clarified, I had a follow-up question of how many of you were fired for no reason or for a bullshit reason, if you pardon my
yeah, uh,
and so this, as I mentioned, at will employment is the law of the land, and it's not a good law that promotes stability or security for our workers or our workplaces. A point that I haven't really brought up so far, which is that if these workers are being fired willy-nilly and these employers want to still turn a profit, they're going to need to be able to rehire somebody, train them, and bring them back up to the speed of where that previous employee was. So this is a very volatile and unstable circumstance for a lot of our local business here in our community. And so this is a boon, this is a win-win for workers and for the workplaces that they inhabit in our community. Just
well,
cause.
yeah. Thank you, Jorge DeFendini. We look forward to new legislation. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt.